Does marriage matter more than a career? Like, and
It's bold.
It's bold, man.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, I didn't even think that should be a question in my mind.
I
And the answer that is in here, man, blows my mind because it is not what I expected. So,
Right.
What is up, my dear friends, and welcome back to another episode of Honey, I'm Home. Today, we're going to be talking about what actually leads to happiness. Regardless of what you go through in life, I think happiness is a key that we all try to find. Happiness always seems to be fleeting, and it's something that only seems to be temporary. But I'm going to be bringing in not only a producer, but one of my great friends, Jesse Woods, to hold this conversation with me as we talk about, what actually leads to happiness, and based upon research, personal opinions, and ultimately I'll give you some takeaways that what I believe that you should begin to focus on if you're struggling to find happiness. Because there was a time in my life that I suffered so much that I didn't think happiness was ever going to be something that I would achieve. Happiness and fulfillment is something that I've always been chasing. I've been running away from boredom and chasing happiness and fulfillment throughout my entire life. I've ran through different hurtful distractions and helpful distractions, but either or. My true goal in life is to feel happy and fulfilled so that I can give that away to many others, to lead more people back to their happy hearts and happier homes. But before we dive into that, my dear friend, today's episode is brought to you by One Team Media. It is your media company if you are ready to share your story, your message, and to get it out there online so that you can have and hold your own influence, build your own personal brand, or help your business build your own brand online as well. So today, like always, if you guys find this podcast helpful, supportive, encouraging, and/or uplifting, be sure to share it out with 1, 2, or 3 of your friends, because that is what's going to help happiness reach more hearts and more homes. So now on today's episode, where we're going to be talking about what leads to happiness. Here we go. Jesse Woods.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to the Honey I'm Home podcast, brother.
Dude, it's an honor to be here.
You ready to run the ones and twos?
Absolutely.
And talk?
Yeah, I love that. I love that.
You think you could do it?
Oh, dude, absolutely. I did it, I think, for one other podcast, and that's about it. It is a little bit weird, but,
Yeah,
it's
just
fun. We're here.
2
We're
and
here.
3.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool, dude. Don't worry if you mess up. I'm not worried about that. I'm worried about the conversation.
Beautiful.
So today we're talking about what leads to happiness, man. And, where this came from was an article by Ramon was sent to me. If you guys didn't listen to my last episode with Ramon, he's been married for 32 plus years. I think that's how you pronounce it, right?
Yeah.
32 plus years, and he gave me some valuable insights and stuff. And it's been absolutely phenomenal to catch up with him. And he sent me an article that caught my attention. And it was an article that basically talked about, does marriage matter more than career? Which then got me to think is like, what actually brings us happiness, man?
Right.
Like, I've struggled with it, and I'm sure that you've had your fair share.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I think you talked about that a little bit on the last episode that we were on together. This is your second time on?
Yeah, second time.
Cool, dude. So I want to start off by reading this research article to everyone to kind of get them understanding where my thoughts are, because this is a really crazy question. Like, does marriage matter more than a career? Like, and
It's bold.
It's bold, man.
Yeah, it really is.
Like, I didn't even think that should be a question in my mind.
I
The answer that is in here, man, blows my mind because it is not what I expected. So, according to an analysis of recent surveys by the University of Virginia, Professor Brad Wilcox, 75% of adults ages 18 to 40 said that making a good living was crucial to their fulfillment and happiness in their life, while only 32% thought that marriage was going to be the crucial thing to their fulfillment and happiness. And in a second research article brought to you by the Pew Research Center survey said that 88% of parents said it was extremely or very important for their kids to be financially independent, while only 21% said it was extremely or very important for their kids to marry. Jesse, what are your thoughts on that, man?
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess, I'll start with mine. I actually am on the end that I do believe marriage and relationship, at least in my life, has a higher value. I think that, obviously having a great career is very important because that also can assist and fuel a happy marriage. Now, that's more like the icing on the cake because you really want to be with a partner that at the end of the day, you guys could, live wherever or however together and still be happy. That is the foundation of a powerful marriage. Now, everything on top of that, I would like to believe is icing on the cake, which is successful career, just all of maybe the material things. Like I'm definitely a firm believer in that structure of a happy household in the sense of loving my partner. And I think then in return also that gives you the ability to have a great career because if you're going home and you're depressed or you're not fulfilled or you're not working or fighting for somebody, dude, I feel like that's a really complicated life. I mean, I spent a lot of my life working and trying to figure out that aspect. And going home to nobody or not being able to share the wins or the ups and downs with somebody, it's a very complicated, existence essentially. Because at the end of the day, you think, what are we doing this for? So, I'd like to hear what you think about it, and we could continue to dive into it. But what are your thoughts on that statistic, and where do you lean?
Yeah, man, it blew my mind.
Yeah.
Because I obviously wrote a book about relationships, and that I said my thesis of that book was that the quality of life we live directly reflected the relationships that we had in our life.
Exactly.
Meaning, if you want to live a great quality of life, you should build great relationships, and if you want to have a shitty life, you have shitty relationships.
Yeah,
That's the bottom line. Everything stems from your relationships.
Right.
With yourself first, because if you're not happy with yourself, somebody else will only bring you temporary happiness.
Absolutely.
And so it's like what's mainly happens, I think, at least for my journey, it was like when I was in the search for quote unquote happiness and fulfillment, I was seeking it in other people, right? So I was going into relationship expecting them to bring me a sense of happiness and fulfillment. And then when that happiness and fulfillment that they were bringing me became not enough, I thought that person was no longer enough or right for me. And I oftentimes destroyed that relationship and broke away from them because I'm like, I don't feel happy or, fulfilled in this relationship, and it's your fault because you're not making me feel that way. No, it's not that person's responsibility to make them feel, make the other person feel happy or fulfilled. And dude, that changed everything for me. But this statistic hurts me because, dude, let me give you this perspective real quick that I think could be helpful.
Yeah.
When you're in a relationship with somebody, let's say you're living at home with them and you right early in the morning, you woke up and you kicked off the morning with a fight.
Yeah.
Now you two are arguing. Now you two are fighting. You leave the door without saying goodbye, I love you, or giving them a kiss or a hug. That wrecks the rest of your day.
Oh, absolutely.
That's what's continuously being wrapped up in your mind, replaying over and over again, where you can't even think about your career, think about your finances, think about your future, think about anything else.
Yeah.
It's very hard for us to pull ourselves out of that troubling time at home. And that's where I think everything stems within a home and within a relationship. And so when people are saying that, what seems to be most important, like this statistic, dude, says that 75% of adults ages 18 to 40 said that making a good living was more important to their fulfillment and happiness in life than finding a lifelong partner.
Yeah. That's troubling.
That's troubling, dude. But here's another thing. I wonder if they were being paid to say that because there's weakness in separation. Isolate the individual, and the individual hold no power and to create own change, right?
That's a deep conversation.
Yeah, dude. That's where my thought goes.
Yeah, it's almost conspiracy.
It is kind of conspiracy, but let's put this research out there and let's formulate a narrative that actually you should focus more on your career and self-centeredness to bring you happiness, and you should isolate and not try to find a partner because that's not what's going to lead to a fulfilled life. Now, I think that's incorrect, man.
Yeah. So I do want to ask you this perspective because I also want to reflect on what you had said as well too, because I think the main pillars and what should be, at least this is mine, this is my perspective.
Hit me with it.
You start with yourself first, because just like you were saying, like you need to be your fullest self to be able to not only have a relationship, but a career as well too. Because
Yeah.
if you're a broken individual trying to find your fulfillment through a career, it's going to be incredibly tough.
Still external.
Absolutely. So yes, it starts with you. Then I think the next most important thing, relationships. And again, this could be friends, family, and whether that be blood or not does not matter. Families, it's a lot of times up to you as well too.
Yep.
Friends, family, and then the partner. So I think then again, the icing on the cake is the career. And I think by having those first two steps completed allows you to step in the highest version of your career. Now, my question for you is, being the relationship expert, what do you think about with the studies out there right now that divorce rates are climbing and climbing and climbing? What is it at right now? 57%, 60%, something like that? I
Yep.
think it's either 57 to 61%. And again, that's only for the people that officially filed divorce. That is not for the people that are living in a broken home, essentially, like they're just roommates at this point.
Right.
But do you think that now it's our opinion to say that's a fractured thought, this research, this idea that, hey, it's being instilled in us at a young age that your career is more important than a relationship. Do you think that misleading value is what leads to these broken homes, these divorce rates, these unhappiness, and this unfulfillment that we're seeing in society today at a pandemic-like rate? Like, everybody's feeling depressed and anxious and stressed, and people are chasing careers but still are not finding happiness. Like, do you think that statistic being implemented in young kids' mind that, hey, my career is more important than the relationships that I have in my life, do you think that has something to do with one another?
Yeah, I think there's probably a strong correlation, man. I think that ultimately it's not a matter of their focus being on a career. There's a deeper focus, which is self-centeredness. And
Exactly.
I don't think that you could place career with, anything else, right? Your own passions. And I think they're important, but like the fact that people are starting to believe that you cannot pursue your passions and pursue your career with somebody,
Yep.
is incorrect.
Yeah.
Like, it's a broken mentality. And like
that's flawed.
Yeah, it's super flawed. And that's why there's broken homes, is because people are entering into relationships in a self-centeredness where they're like, you need to treat me with this respect, with this love, and give me what I want.
And what can you do for me?
And what can you do for me? And it's like, scratch that. Like, unconditional love says, I love you, regardless of what you do for me.
Absolutely.
Jesus taught that lesson in Scripture. I'm not saying like pushing, Christianity or like, any type of religion. I'm just saying, like, good lesson says, like, you need to self-sacrifice. It's not, you can't enter a great relationship and have a great love and a great connection, human experience with somebody else if you're not willing to give up parts of yourself for them, and stop being a me mentality. The me mentality is what's breaking so many hearts and homes and people.
And society we're divided.
And 100%. And that's why I think it's like, is this the truth? Because it's kind of weird that the statistic says, there's another statistic that I read. It said 88% of parents push their children to focus more on career than finding a lifelong partner.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that to say, like, I would say that at least out of those statistics, 50-50, one of us should be believing that the opposite of what we're arguing is true, meaning that, you're like, no, career is most important because you've got to take care of your financial needs before you can try to bring someone else into your life. Here's the best part of having a relationship with my wife is that brings a second income into my house to make it easier to live in 2024.
Exactly. And I think it's just not being looked at in the proper manner. Like, what are we looking at as like a career? Are we looking at a household income or a personal income? Because then just raw facts is two incomes is better anyway. So
always better.
And I think this is going against like our core fundamentals as humans. And what I mean by that is our existence is based upon eating, sleeping, drinking, reproducing.
Yeah.
Because you cannot reproduce and grow. And I believe that that's one of our like moral laws to ourselves. Like, I think we live in a free world to an extent, obviously, but like, I think one of our obligations to just human race is obviously we have to eat, we have to sleep because we have to be able to function. But if nobody reproduced and it was always just a free for all,
Yeah.
we wouldn't be where we're at today as a society as a whole. Like you can't function as a one-man team. That is why there is a male and a female that, or however that goes, but like just the
Sure.
idea of reproducing to bring in more children, more people, and there's a lot of layers in that, but at the end of the day, that's how we further ourselves as a species.
100%, man. I think, with that being said, the human mind has been developed over millions of years, and we still have those primal brains that basically try to keep us alive,
Yeah.
which is a good thing. And part of surviving and thriving in life and creating happiness is reproducing,
Yeah.
right? And fulfilling that urge that I think every person experiences and needs. It's a part of survival. It's our survival instinct. But, it's crazy where people are trying to push other people in regards to, hey, focus on you and not on them, because that's what will make you happy. I think that here's the truth is I think that you should take care of you. I think the starting point is you can't give away happiness if you don't have it yourself.
Yeah.
Or you can, but only for a little bit of time.
Absolutely.
You might be able to trick them, but you'll never be able to trick yourself, I don't think, because you'll always know that you're not happy. So you can go into a relationship and thinking that you're, I can make her believe or him believe that I'm happy, but realistically, what's making me happy is that they're giving me happiness, and as soon as they stop, then you're like, something's wrong here. No, like the purpose of that is to always bring yourself back to it and take care of yourself. I was looking here, and I have a couple different things. There was another. It's one of the longest running studies on adult life that has ever been revealed through the Harvard. It was a Harvard study on adult development, and there were they were talking about the key contributors to happiness. So this is the longest study that's ever been done, I would say, and it started in 1938. And they've been following two different groups of men throughout their lives, examining various aspects of their physical and mental health, relationships, and overall happiness. And here are some of the insights from the study. The number one key to our happiness is quality relationships.
Yes.
The second one is social connection, and the third one is having emotional resilience. And if you don't know what that means, it just kind of means that, individuals who were better able to cope with stress and difficult times, heartbreak, adversity, more often than not, experience a greater quality of life because they were able to cope with and get through those times. So it's crazy that, Harvard, a well-protected institute, right, is stating that since 1938, they've been following two groups of men, and they've found that if you want to live a happy life, you need happy relationships. That's all that it stems down to.
Absolutely.
So now some bozo at another university decides to say that.
Well, it's as simple as that. You're going to find an argument for both sides of things, and I think, I like to boil things down to what our raw instincts are, because I don't think that it's everybody's obligation to reproduce and have children, because that's a flawed thought in itself too.
Sure.
Some people can't, don't want to, etc. And that's all great.
Personal,
But I think at the core of our existence, we are a tribal species. So
so much
you go into even just thinking about careers, we're talking about careers. Hunters and gatherers didn't have careers. What was it? What was their job? It was to go gather food, kill, and protect. For who? Not for themselves.
Sure.
It was for the betterment of their people and their culture and their community.
Yeah.
Because again, going back to that time, if you wanted to be independent in a hunter and gatherer's time, you're done. You're not gonna further your bloodline.
Yeah, that's true.
My last name is Woods. If I was I'm going to be a lone wolf and hunter, guess what's going to kill me? Probably a pack of wolves. You know what I mean? Because you have to, can't, we are not designed to be independent creatures. I just don't believe that. No. I think there's so much longevity and there's so much importance into, the partner, the relationships, the communities. And again, it doesn't always have to be so boiled down to, you have to have a wife or a husband or whatever the case may be. But if you don't have a community and a sense of person, I can speak from experience, isolation will beat you down to a potential point of no return. I'm thankful that I got out of that, but it's tough.
That's crazy that you just spoke that, because I always when I talk to my clients about happiness, and they're like, I just can't seem to get happy. I'm like, yeah, because you're always alone, and it's not a good thing. You think about how some of the cruelest people in the world, how they go through their suffering is when they're in prison.
Yes.
They go into the isolation, right?
Yep.
They can't talks, see, not,
And they're already kind of isolated.
yeah, but even
Gets
more
even
so,
worse.
they don't
Yeah.
see anybody,
Yeah.
right? So that's the greatest form of, I think, unhappiness. Sometimes if you want to find happiness, you got to understand what doesn't make you happy. And then you stop doing those things.
Yeah.
But understand that there is research done, and this is why prisons implement it, is
Yes.
that isolation leads to unhappiness.
Yes.
So what this is saying is like, hey, isolate
Insanity.
yourself, focus on your career, get your
Yeah.
finances right, and then maybe if you want to, but it doesn't need to be, you should look into, settling down with someone. And then
Yeah.
people would argue, well,
Scary.
divorce rates are so high, and it's like, yeah, because
But it's because of that thinking,
it's
though.
because of that thinking, and too many people are too damn weak.
Yeah.
They're not willing to get through the adversity to build even stronger connection. My wife and I went through, in the past 7-8 years, we've went through some crazy adversity.
Yeah.
But every time we've overcome that adversity, what happened? Greater connection, greater communication, greater happiness, greater sense of like, I see why I married you.
Yeah.
Because we can get through these challenging times together. And I also think, man, how important it is to be very tribal and build that community.
Yeah.
Because it's like, dude, it takes a lot of people to grow another human being. Like
Exactly.
a kid
Yeah.
or yourself. You got to make
Takes
sure,
a
like,
village.
yeah, it takes a village, and most of the time it's a party of one.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because they can't stay together because somebody's not holding up the end of the bargain, and it's like, well, when my wife cannot make me happy, and I want to start pointing fingers at her, I have to sit down and reflect, and it's really hard, but I have to sit down and reflect,
tough.
and I'm like, oh, where am I not feeling happy in my own life right now? One of those places is like, I feel like I should be further along in life.
Yeah.
That always dwindles my happiness right
For
away.
sure,
I'm
for
like, man,
sure.
I should be making more money. I should be able to, reach
Should
this
be
amount of
further
audience. I
along.
should be, my podcast should be further. I should be, all of these expectations that
Yeah.
are realistic, but they're holding me back. So sometimes I have to be like, okay, well, I feel unhappy with my wife because she's not bringing me happiness. I just have to dwindle down and realize, man, it's not up to her to bring me happiness. She can be a part of it, but not the main source of it. And it's like there's a lot to be said here, with that. But tell me a little bit. Like, we're talking about, what leads to happiness.
Yeah.
Jesse, what has led to your happiness, or more importantly, what have you done that has stopped you from experiencing happiness? And then what are some of the things that you might have implemented in the last, let's say, year that have helped you to find a little bit more happiness and fulfillment in your own life that you could share with other people who are in that place of maybe aloneness or just unhappiness?
Absolutely. And actually, I think there's a way to tie this all into together to kind of make sense of things. And I'll kind of build up to it here. So for myself, and I spoke upon it on the first Honey I'm Home we did, I spent a lot of time isolated in my life through broken home and just fractured thoughts of like, because I feel like I had a little bit of that mentality instilled in me of like, you can be a lone wolf, you could do things on your own, like you don't need people, because throughout my life I've experienced a lot of like, just throughout with my family and everything, like being kind of left alone, and that could be through a plethora of things. Obviously I was a kid, so I didn't really understand everything at that time, but I was given, and I was instilled with the idea that like you could do this on your own, and I tried that, and it was very complicated. And it was like, I was like, why do I feel so unfulfilled? I'm a very open person, but always been called a social butterfly throughout, early elementary school and everything. And what happens when you cage, a butterfly, for example? Like, they need to spread their wings and fly. Now, again, I know that that's not everybody's thought, but where I want to kind of tie this back together and like where my life started to change is being around people. And I always wanted that, but the complexity of finding people to be around is also finding the right people to be around. And that's huge, because you don't want to just be around anybody, or people in general, or because I struggled with like being able to connect with a lot of people, because I'm a bit of a unique person, very diverse in my thoughts, and just I love to explore and express, and there's so many layers to that. So it's kind of hard in a world that there's a lot of one-way thinking. There's a lot of black and white, meaning like ways of thought, like, oh, it's either yes or no. And I love to just experience the question and the conversation and the thought. So I love that. But when you're somebody that's like that, which I think a lot of us have that in us, and you isolate that, it's very complex. But where I want to tie this together is that idea of business is more important than relationships, I actually think that that's wrong, because what are we all doing in this building together? Okay, we're all entrepreneurs that are working on being entrepreneurs, and we went far by ourselves with our businesses, but we're on the path to going way farther, because now we all came together and we're a community.
Right.
So how you could kind of tie that study together and say, like, is this the right frame of thinking? Because we could only get so far by ourselves as an entrepreneur, but now we have a team of, just right now on our side, 6 to 8 people, depending on what you want to, say who works with us on a daily. But we're going farther because we're together. We're building a relationship together. Now, I understand that that's talking about marriage, but I'm talking about relationships and community as a whole. It would take us so much longer individually to get where we're at right now, but we're now, exponentially farther because we've come together. So I think that study is giving a fractured thought to people, where it's like, you got to do things solo. And I don't think that that's smart, even for your career. Think about it that way. Like, that's not smart either. So
Yeah, I would agree, man. I agree. I think why I agree is because there was a time that I did it solo as well, this whole entrepreneurial journey. And one of the things that helped me to create happiness in my life was understanding and listening to other people's stories, to understand that my own suffering was the exact same suffering that a lot of other people experience, which then was like, oh, this is all just part of the human experience.
Yes.
And it's normal. Like, the fact that we think that suffering shouldn't be a part of our life, and that's why we suffer even more, because we label it as bad, we don't label it as good. We're
natural.
like, it's just part of life. It's what's supposed to happen. Yeah. And it's like, but you don't know that if you keep yourself isolated.
Exactly.
You don't understand that it's supposed to be hard. If you don't understand that, then it's like, you're going to have a troubled life. It's going to hurt really bad. Yeah. And you know, that's where I'm like, I've learned to adapt and to like cope with, troubling times in my life. And, I want to kind of wrap this up a little bit here and just talk about a couple various factors that can lead to both internal and external happiness that I've found in my own life. And I've written down a couple of things here. These are some simple things, but sometimes common sense isn't always common practice. You know, it means means like, you may know it, doesn't mean you're doing it.
Yep.
And there's a difference. Like, you know what you need to do, but I don't care if you know what you need to do. Are you doing it? Like, I know I need to love my wife, but that's completely different than to actually love her. Yeah. Right? Even when I don't feel like it. Like, first things first, if you want to live a better life, F your feelings. Yeah. Like, honestly, like, I've come to a place where I'm like, feelings are just there. And if you allow yourself to stop labeling your feelings, you feel better. It's just how it works. It's
you could only feel how you let yourself feel.
Right. Yeah. It's like, so if you don't understand how to do that, go look at the sky and watch the clouds that pass. You're not judging clouds, and you're not judging the trees that you're passing when you're driving home. You see them, right? And you just let them go. You see them and you let them go. You're not the same process for my emotions. It's like, man, that feeling is weird. I don't like it, but you know what? I'm going to just let it pass. I'm not going to label it as bad or good. It's just an emotional part of our experience. And here's some things that I've implemented in my own life. Like I said, that are common sense, but not common practice. And I want to label like 3 here that I think are probably important, the most important. The first thing is taking care of myself. Like, you've got to we started this conversation by saying, you've got to start with a relationship with yourself. Yes. And some would argue, that the relationship with God is the most important. It starts with the foundation. In my home, I do believe that if I have to get my relationship with God right, because marriage is difficult. Okay. If you want to create a fulfilling relationship with someone, you've got to rely on more than just yourself. That's where building a community, connection, relying on other people, being in a small church group like I am, just being around other good-hearted men that are trying to stay in a committed, married relationship, right? Community is important because they will hold you accountable toward your core values, toward your core mission, toward just being like, hey, you're going off the beaten path here. It's that real good, not feel good style. So self-care, just taking care of your physical and mental health, whatever that looks like to you. I think, ultimately what it looks like to me is going to the gym three times a week and doing a lot more walking outside. I think, that's more of the physical. The mental is just writing. I love to write. I love thinking like I'm a philosopher. I love putting myself in this like
we're all our own philosophers
yeah, like
to life.
we
our
are
lives,
right.
you know?
So it's like I want to be Plato, like in my own dungeon, like
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
in
yeah.
my own, like I have a blanket over my head, like
Yeah.
in the mornings, and I'm like in this dark room, and I'm just like writing in my
That's
remarkable,
me in the
and I'm
studio.
just like just kind
It's
of
the
like
same stuff.
kind of
Yeah.
crafting my own piece of
Yeah, yeah.
artwork, and I just let my mind just throw up on this page and talk about all the good things and bad things. That's
Yeah.
really helped me a lot. Another
profound.
thing, man, has just been my my consistent commitment to my personal growth.
Mm-hmm.
The secret to happiness, man, is not only relationships, but your ability to continue to grow. If you want,
It's not the end goal, it's the process of getting there.
And-
Fall in love with the process.
fall in love with the process, fall in love with growing, man. Every day. Like, if you're not growing, you're what? Probably dying, right?
Yeah,
You're
stagnant.
withering away,
Yep.
you're stagnant. We talk about this all the time. So, like,
Yes.
how can you grow mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, relationally? How can you grow and push yourself? If you can figure out get a little bit of a game plan, your growth game plan,
Yeah.
and try to just even one thing on each one of those 7 days a week. So let's just say you want to grow mentally, emotionally, physically, spiritually, financially, relationally, and one day just like you just want to grow something in your passion that you're feeling purposeful about.
Yeah.
Like one thing is all you need to do to continue to create great change.
Yeah,
So
stack it up.
yeah, commit to that personal growth and that personal development. Last but not least is just start to try to think more positively. Like there was a time where I could not think for myself positive thoughts. So I started to absorb other people's thoughts and listening to podcasts and
Yep,
audiobooks
same,
to help
same.
me to just rewire my brain. Like
Yep.
because my brain was really just messed up,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was not in a good place. It was suicidal brain. It was like,
yeah.
what's the point to all of this suffering?
Yeah.
And it'd be easier to just end it now
Feel
and
that.
to not suffer.
Yeah.
Right. So it's like, between taking care of yourself, committing to personal growth, and just consistently battling those thoughts of negativity. So anytime I had a negative thought, I try to add 2 positive thoughts, right? And it's not something that I want all the time, but that was my awareness practice. Part of like achieving happiness is being aware of what doesn't make you happy,
Yeah.
and then do something different to
Yeah,
make
yeah.
you happy. So is there any final thoughts that you'd like to share on this topic of, basically what leads to happiness, man?
Yeah, no, I think you covered those are, and the thing is, and what's so complex about us as humans and experience and all this stuff, it's going to look different for everybody. So nothing that we're saying here is like, oh, this is exactly how you get to happiness. And I think anybody that claims that,
Yeah.
that's a flawed version of thinking too. Well, what really our existence is it's always going to be different, and you could boil it down to the same core fundamentals, which that's kind of where we're trying to come from at that angle. It's like, hey, focus on these cores, or like this is what we believe that the core fundamentals to being a happy human and a happy relationship and a happy community.
Don't overcomplicate it.
Exactly. And it's going to look different for you than it would me and and whoever else is listening. But at the end of the day, it really does boil down to taking care of yourself. And even that religion could slide into the relationship you have with yourself, because religion looks different for people as well too.
100%.
So that's that fits in that taking care of you, your thoughts, your beliefs, how you treat yourself, how you treat others, and etc. Then I think the next level is the community, the family, the relationships. And again, just because now if you're single, it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm worth nothing then, and I don't have a career. So that's not what it's about. Again, it's that journey and that process that you should fall in love with. Where, like, what's more exciting? Like, like when you get married to your wife, you're like, oh, that's the peak of it. All right, we're done now. No, it's the journey of continuing every day of like loving and how can I one up yesterday and how can I love more? It's like, well, isn't marriage the peak of love? No, it's like it's the journey of every day trying to level that up. It should be the same way in your career, because I want to make $1 million. But when you get to $1 million, do you just stop? No, it's the falling in love with how did I get to this point? So like, I think it's just rewiring, reframing, like that cognitive like dissonance is, if I'm saying that correctly, that is what I think is so profound that we actually have the ability to do. And it's very complicated, but I think it's very rewarding. Rewiring your brain, if you feel like that's necessary. I think that's something that I consume in my podcast, and like when I'm listening or experiencing life. How can I rewire my brain to be my highest version of myself? And that's going to be like through experiences. I have an emotion, notice it. How can I redirect it? And then actually redirecting it. And doing that over time starts to build up control of your own brain, of your own experience, and you can kind of get it more into that free will of life where it's like, hey, these external things are making me feel a certain way. I'm noticing it and then I'm redirecting it. And that just starts to develop like the slow growth of power and personal development. And then you could, be your best self for your partner, your career, whatever that may be. And again, we're not saying like, oh, our way's right, like you should want to develop a relationship. For right now, I'm single, focusing on a career right now, and I would love to have a partner, going through this as well too. But it's like, sometimes it's not right for everybody at the time and everything. But I understand that my end goal, whether that be career or relationships, it's having that relationship, being a father, being a husband, because that's where I feel like you get the most fulfillment. Because at the end of the day, what are you really building a career for? Is it just for yourself? Are you going to enjoy those cars and the big house by yourself? What's more depressing than like a big house with nobody in it? You know what I mean?
Or even a
Like,
small house with nobody in it, right?
exactly. Yeah,
'Cause,
exactly.
Yeah, it
So
sucks.
I think there's a lot of like, we could go on and on and on about this. But I think in short, boiling it down to, understanding yourself, valuing the importance of community, relationships, and then letting that fuel that career, because the strong relationships that you develop in your community and with your partner can also lead to better fulfillment in your career as well too. Like I think if you're focusing on a career first, I would just think to yourself, like, how much better could this be when I'm fighting for somebody, going home and seeing your person and being like, I do this for not only myself, but for you. And I think that amplifies things. Like, we're, like I said, we're tribal. That's why we love our sports teams. That's why we love our politics, our religion. It's being a part of something. If you don't feel a part of something, and I've heard a study that they say like isolation is one of the like there are healthier people that are smoking packs of cigarettes and drinking all day because they
Yeah.
might have a community,
Yeah.
and so they're at least
Sure.
fulfilled,
Yeah, in some
to
way.
that exactly in
Yeah.
some way. Now obviously there's layers to that too, but
Yeah.
again, it's really about that community, that relationship, getting to our core fundamentals, and being able to be our best for ourselves, and then that also projects out into the world, and it could be a beautiful thing. So take it for what it is. So.
Man, that's huge. I do appreciate you jumping on today and holding this conversation with me. And my dear friends, if you have found this podcast helpful, supportive, encouraging, and or uplifting, be sure to share it out with 1, 2, or 3 of your friends to help them find a greater level of happiness in their heart and homes, because I believe that if we can create more happiness in our hearts and in our homes, we can create a happier world out there. And the last little piece of advice I'd give you is always to remember that the quality of life that you live will always directly reflect the relationships that you have with yourself, others, God, and everything in between. And so if you want to live a fulfilled quality of life and you want to understand what leads to happiness, lead yourself into joyful and loving relationships. My name is Tylerjoestratton, and this is Honey, I'm Home.